Hello everyone, I have just finished reading this book here. Um, this was in silver, but it's all rubbed off, I guess, because it's been very hot and I guess sweat and everything. It's The Laws of Human Nature by Robert Greene. Robert Greene also wrote The Laws of Power, um, Mastery, The 50th Law, The Daily Laws. It was the 48 Rules of Power, I think it was called. Some more in here. Yeah, here we go. So the 48 Laws of Power, read that in my 20s. That was brilliant. Was really impressed by that. The Art of Seduction, never read that. The 33 Strategies of War, never read that either. I've never been to war. um, Mastery, never read that. The 50th Law, which he wrote with 50 Cent or something. So I think I saw that. I thought, who'd really want to read that? I didn't read that. The Laws of Human Nature, amazing, which is this one. I'll read you the back. You are about to become an apprentice in human nature. First, the laws will work to transform you into a calmer and more strategic observer of people, helping to free you from all the emotional drama that needlessly drains you. Second, the laws will make you a master interpreter of the cues that people continually emit, giving you a much greater ability to judge their character. Third, the laws will empower you to take on and outthink the toxic types who inevitably cross your path. Fourth, the laws will teach you the true levers for motivating and influencing people, the true levers, however you want to say it. Fifth, the laws will give you the power to alter your own negative patterns. When I read the back of it, the bit that most interested me was number 5. The laws will give you the power to alter your own negative patterns. If you think that most of your problems are down to your own habits or your own lack of this or your own lack of that, maybe the book will appeal to you in that way as well. Or if you think everybody is difficult, maybe the bit that will appeal to you is taking on and outthinking the toxic types who inevitably cross your path. It is an absolutely brilliant book, 10 out of 10 straight away. And actually, I've got another book to read that I have to have read by a deadline for a book club. It's a fiction book. I usually don't read fiction, but the book club decided that they're only going to read fiction, which I think is a whole load of nonsense because some of the best books I've ever read are non-fiction. And in terms of actually telling stories, which is what fiction does, some of the best stories are historical stories. And one of the things that Robert Greene does incredibly well is weaves together history, psychology. So, for example, some of the people in here, the famous people in here, he uses to. Oh, this chair's a bit too small, isn't it? Can I fit in here? No, this chair must have been made when people were much smaller than me. So he uses the examples of Gabrielle Chanel, Coco Chanel. He used the examples of Danton from the French Revolution. He looks at the characters of J.P. Morgan, Lyndon Baines Johnson, lots of famous historical figures, Benjamin Franklin, just lots of them. But he doesn't look at them in a sort of celebrity, amazing way. He looks at their childhood, where it's relevant, what drove them. He looks at the time in which they were born. So, you have a very successful person, but they might not necessarily have been successful if they'd been born in a different time. Because one of the ideas that comes from this book is who you are, part of who you are, is massively influenced by when you were born. That's why I guess you have different categories, don't you? Millennials, Generation X, baby boomers, etc. And what was going on in the world at that time and where you were born has an enormous influence. Where can be a place it can be a location or a place in time. Lots of fascinating ideas in this book. So he talks about here's a law of human nature, for example. Here's a person whose life showed that they really used that law to get to where they were going. And then he has the keys to human nature and the interpretation in each chapter. It's absolutely brilliant. And I don't really think I can do it justice. It's sublime. His definition of sublime is something that is too great to explain in words. So anyway, I'm going to read that fiction book, which was also one of my suggestions anyway, J.G. Ballard, Cocaine Nights. And then I'll probably just go straight back and read this again. This book is so good. It's let me go through there's so much in it that you can't really get much from just one reading, apart from a whole load of entertainment and a whole load of interesting stories to tell. But I think it's one of those books that actually needs to be studied and internalized because there's so much good in it. The funny thing is, when I say studied and internalized, a lot of people say, "Oh, that's a good book, a big book. Are you reading the Bible?" And then it occurred to me that actually this should be read like the Bible. It needs to be studied because there's a lot in it. Bible scholars have read the Bible, and probably good Bible scholars have read the Bible and other religious books for comparison. How many times? And that's why they know it. That's why they can quote from it. That's why they can live their rules according to, live their lives according to the rules that are in there. And I believe it's the same with this, the laws of human nature. Um, Determine the strength of people's character. That's chapter 4. The laws of compulsive behavior. Um, I'm just going through now. See through people's masks. The law of role playing. Know your limits. The law of grandiosity. It's so good. I wish I could give you more than a very surface level analysis of the book, but I literally just finished reading it, and it's like I've eaten an enormous meal, and I'm at that point where after an enormous meal you're sort of overwhelmed. You're in a food coma. You can't really do much. Um, but I thoroughly recommend it. I also might go back and read again the 48 Laws of Power. But I don't think I'll find it as useful in my current stage in life as I would reading this book again. That's another thing he talks about. You can change your relationship to time um, by not letting other people's ideas. Let's say you're in your 40s. You don't have to look at it as your midlife crisis. You could just look at it, right? So I'm at a stage in my life that I want to define as such or as such. Um, the last chapter talks about becoming more aware of death, to treat it as a deadline, because when you have a deadline you get things done. Otherwise a lot of the time you're just floating through life, especially if you're fortunate enough to have a good life or an easy life, and you are going to die. And then there's a good quote in here about one's disgust at death is in equal proportion to how much time they have wasted. It wasn't in those words, but that was the underlying meaning of it. Absolutely brilliant, this. And I think I've probably said as much as I can say about it that's useful without waffling. So I'm just going to go through the chapters now to give you an idea of how much there is in this. And there's very little in this that I would say is superfluous or nonsense. It's all good stuff. So you've got the introduction, obviously. Then you've got Master Your Emotional Self, the inner Athena. So there he talks about Pericles and the fall of Athens, and how Pericles was very, very logical, very unlike other politicians at the time who were all about grandiosity and big gestures and everything. He would step back and look at the situation and make a plan. And even though he only entered politics in his 30s, a lot of people did it before that, and they were warriors or whatever. He wasn't. He was a very good strategist and always seen as the voice of reason, and gained in his respect and his stature because he had a very long career in politics, which was also unusual. It was about a 30-year career. And then eventually, when the Peloponnesians, Spartans, they came with a new peace treaty between the Athenians and the Spartans, which was basically just a list of demands. And it was either accept them or go to war. Pericles' plan would have worked, but a terrible illness spread throughout the Athenians, who were all kind of holed up in their in their garrison. And so then people started panicking, people started not thinking according to a plan, and it led to pretty much non-stop wars between Athens, the Athenians and the Spartans, and eventually the fall of the empire. So, my God, these are good memory triggers reading these chapters. So, keys to human nature: recognize the biases, beware the inflaming factors, strategies toward bringing out the rational self. And then number 2 is transform self-love into empathy. The example he uses here is Ernest Shackleton, who managed to get his men back after everything went wrong. It was 18 months rowing in the freezing sea, he kept them all alive by not being the boss, not being the bully, just really empathizing with each one and seeing what they're feeling, seeing what they're needing. A really remarkable story. If you ever tried to lead any people to do anything, think about the obstacles they were facing. They all survived. It's absolutely incredible. And he did that through incredible empathy. He talks about empathy. Most people are so absorbed in themselves. I have a conversation, I'm going to tell you all about myself. I'm not going to listen to you or ask you questions. It's a shitty conversation. You know, if you have empathy, and another really, really good book on this, I can't remember the author, but it's called How to Know a Person. That's worth reading as well. That's about empathy. Turn the spotlight away from yourself, put it on somebody else, and really see what they want to say. So that's that strategy. Transform self-love into empathy. See through people's masks. The second language, keys to human nature, observational skills, decoding keys, the art of impression management. I can't remember who he used for that one. Determine the strength of people's character. Become the elusive object of desire. I think for that one he used Coco Chanel, who was pretty much an orphan, raised in an orphanage, but it did pretty well, right? Elevate your perspective. Moments of madness, keys to human nature. 4 signs of short-sightedness and strategies to overcome them. Once again, this is about being far-sighted and how it pays off. Soften people's resistance by confirming their self-opinion. You can never really challenge and change someone's ideas. As soon as you challenge it, the more entrenched it becomes. So that chapter is all about influence, and it starts off with the very the very valid observation that if you want to influence someone, you don't start by challenging them. If you want to change their opinions, listen to their opinions first, rather than, oh no, everything you're saying is shit. That's just going to make them even more entrenched, even if they agree that some of what they believe hasn't been fought for. As soon as you attack it, they're just going to hold on to it. Change your circumstances by changing your attitude. That one sounds a bit American self-help, but it is a good one. It's another good one because it's all about self-sabotage. I found that chapter very, very interesting. Confront your dark side. Beware the fragile ego. Know your limits. Reconnect to the masculine, to the feminine within you. So I don't know if you know this story about how a lot of religious religions started out with the belief that man and woman were originally one being, but the gods feared them so much because they were so powerful being one being that they split them in half and created men and created women. And that's where the idea of one's better half comes from. But we all have feminine and we all have masculine traits, and we should get in touch with both of them because there are qualities, feminine qualities, however you want to call them, masculine qualities, they all have their advantages. They all have their strengths, they all have their uses. So you become more of a complete person by embracing both, not by, well, I can't ever be seen to be emotional because I'm a man, or, a woman saying, well, I can't be too assertive because I'm a woman. That's bullshit, but it's very strongly conditioned by society and by expectations bullshit. Just reading the book makes you aware of that. Advance with a sense of purpose, resist the downward pull of the group. I really like that one. Make them want to follow you, see the hostility behind the friendly facade. Who did they use for that? I can't remember. I think, that was J.P. Morgan. Always very polite, but obsessed, madly in love with money. Hated anybody being ahead of him. And a very interesting story they told there was that his father was a notorious con man who'd just disappear for months on end. While he was gone, the family didn't know if they were going to have enough money to survive, to eat, or to do anything. Then he'd come back with a wad of cash, and they'd be flush for a while, but then he'd disappear, and the money would run out. So this gave J.P. Morgan an absolutely visceral sexual love for money, and it was the most important thing to him. Because of the volatility of his upbringing, when he discovered the volatility of the oil game, he fell in love with that, even though he was a very polite, very quiet, very soft-spoken person. Underneath he was just an animal. Very, very politely destroying everything in his path, creating monopolies. Even if people got in front of him on the road in their horse and cart, he'd go, he'd go like mad on his horse to get back in front. So he could not stand anybody overtaking him or taking away his power in any way at all. Seize the historical moment, meditate on our common mortality. That's all of it. I don't know how long this review's been, but it's a long book. But you know what? 586 pages. You're much better off reading one 586 book that's amazing than reading two books that are 293 pages and crap. That's the way I see it. Or even good, but not quite as amazing as this. If you haven't read any Robert Greene, read this. Read the 48 Laws of Power. I think you'll really enjoy them. This is amazing. Like I said, I'm going to read it again as soon as I get Cocaine Nights out of the way. But I haven't brought that with me, so I might just have to start on this again. I'm here for the next 2 days, so hope you enjoyed that. Buy the book.